Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Business of InfoSec Top 100 USA APAC panel discussion. Good to speak. My name is Catherine King, and I'm the Director for the Business of InfoSec team here at Crinium. Our guests today are featured within the InfoSec Top 100 Leaders in Information Security report, Crinium's list of the world's top 100 leaders in information security. Now, this report exists to celebrate the outstanding work over the last 12 months of some of the greatest minds of information security. Now, we have brought a few of them together here today to discuss some of the biggest and most important questions. So I'm going to bring them up onto stage now. So welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to our audience for joining us as well. Peter, lovely to see you. Sadrul, lovely to see you. Now, if you do have any questions across the next 30 minutes, then please do send them in via the comment section. I'm going to keep my eye on the live stream. It would be great to hear from you. But welcome to our speakers. I'm going to ask you to do a round of introductions if you wouldn't mind. So, John, I'll start with you.
Yes, well, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. John Ellis, the Chief Information Security Officer for BUPA here in Australia and New Zealand.
Thank you so much, John. Ashwin, welcome.
Thank you. Good day to everyone. Ashwin Pal here from Unisys, Director for Cybersecurity across Asia-Pac.
Thank you so much, Ashwin. And then Rob, please.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Rob again. I'm the Associate Director of Information Security at the Queensland University of Technology. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us. And as I say there, for those just joining us and tuning in now, Ashish, thank you. Lovely to see you. Get those questions in nice and early so that we can tailor this session to you. But I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask lined up first. The first question I've got is, how did the COVID-19 pandemic impact your information security strategy? I know this was different for many organizations. For some people, it was a case of acceleration. For some people, it was completely changing course entirely. So I'd like to know for you, how did it impact that InfoSec strategy? Ashwin, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, sure thing. So I've got an internal and an external perspective as well, because we actually work with a lot of clients. So, you know, on the internal side, two big things actually happened for us. One was actually making sure everybody could work remotely and work remotely securely. So there was a lot of work that actually had to be undertaken with that regard. VPN access, VPN-less access in some cases as well. We actually had to upgrade our concentrators and all the rest of it. On top of that, we actually ended up moving a lot of our workload into the cloud as well to actually allow easier access. And there was an interesting experience on its own. So, that as much as we were actually moving stuff into the cloud, that accelerated that journey out of necessity. What was interesting also is that, we actually saw very similar trends from other clients as well. We had some good stories, frankly, and then we had some horror stories as well. Where people just didn't allow secure remote access, and they actually had compromises and other issues. People that actually put their workloads into the cloud and they actually weren't secured appropriately as well. So that actually caused some dramas too. But definitely an interesting experience for everybody in cyber, just having to accelerate everything.
Absolutely. Ashwin, I love your honesty there, that actually it wasn't all fantastic and that there were certainly some challenges there. I think it'll be interesting to dive into those a little bit later on. But the cloud and remote working, as if one wouldn't be hard enough, doing two at the same time. Fantastic. Rob, how about yourself? How did COVID-19 impact your information security strategy?
Yeah, look, we found ourselves in an interesting situation where we had an on-site university with lots of people on premises, and we had just a couple of days' notice before we had to go fully remote with all our learning and teaching, and as well as our corporate services and our research services. So it was a big change in a lot of ways, but in some ways it wasn't. So we've always had a certain cohort of people who worked at home or who worked remotely. Or from other countries, depending where their research was happening from. So the systems themselves were in place, the capacity perhaps wasn't. So we had to spend some time increasing VPN capacity, and then just helping people who hadn't normally worked offsite to be able to work offsite successfully. And because of our sudden loss of income from international students, our funding model kind of changed overnight. So that's presented us with some interesting challenges. But one of the things we decided to focus on was that most of our incidents come out of email. So we'd spent some time well before COVID in securing our email boxes on whatever device people were using. So we had some level of comfort that we had that, at least that attack vector covered. So yeah, thanks.
Fantastic. And as you say, you were on the road to doing that. So I suppose hindsight was really a blessing in that resilience for you, in that you were making those steps forward. And then when it became, more pertinent, you already had that sorted. Fantastic. John, how about yourself over at Bupa? What, because I know you started your role very, very close into COVID-19. So how did the pandemic impact your strategy?
Well, I guess one of the amazing things at Bupa was just how well the organisation rallied around the goal of being able to enable our business to work remotely. We already had a number of the key ingredients in place with a lot of the cloud services up and running and things like that, and also we're in the midst of a significant transformation program. So being able to mobilise a lot of those project resources to be able to do their work remotely was a big focus of what we did. But the other thing that was really quite interesting in terms of learnings was being able to look at taking a number of the business practices that had really historically been set up to work in an on-prem environment. So, that'd be like a call center and things like that, and then taking that into a virtualized setup and understanding how do we navigate through some of the complexities of things like PCI, right, in terms of how do we secure cardholder data when you've got someone sitting in a flat, an apartment, and they've got other flatmates, So that was a really interesting experience, and just seeing how the organisation rallied around solving some of those interesting, complex problems was quite fascinating. But we got to a really good place, and we, in terms of the actual impact on our strategy, it really just accelerated a number of areas that we're already investing in. And also gave us confirmation that the direction that we'd already been undertaking as an organisation and moving a lot of our workload to the cloud, using some buzzword bingo terms here, but adopting a SASE type approach and zero trust models and things like that were the right direction. So we were, it was a very interesting time, certainly as I just joined the organisation. So that was my first big challenge.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So some really, really great answers there. Now, just a reminder to get those questions in if you have them, because we've only got a short amount of time today. We've already had a full 10 minutes. We've only got 20 minutes left. So if you do have any questions, please do pop them in. So with that knowledge of how your strategies have had to pivot and accelerate, the next question I've got for you all, which is what have been your key learnings over the past year? I think we've certainly all learned a lot, and even then it's now past a year, isn't it, since we've been going through this turbulent time. So what have been the real key learnings for you and your team? Rob, I'll come to you first for that one.
Yeah, look, I think most of my key learnings were around how we work with our teams. So what we found during this period was that people like to work differently, and some people like to work at home, and some people didn't. Some people had a house full of children that had to do education, and it wasn't really conducive to working from home in the same way that someone like myself with no children in the house might have. So I think as a leader, you really had to get a deeper understanding of what the best ways of connecting with your people were. Some people want a phone call each day and that keeps them going. Some people you just might send an email every now and then and catch up when they need something. The other thing I noticed was that often when you're all in the office working together and something's happening, you hear that organically. So when we were all out of the office, I didn't really hear some of those things that were happening until they'd actually turned into incidents and so on. So we kind of had to adjust the way we were working to keep each other informed. And I think the other thing was really encouraging people to get some fresh air, because you sit in these Zoom meetings for a number of consecutive Zoom meetings across the day. So get some fresh air at the end of the day was really a good piece of advice, I think. Thanks.
Absolutely, and I think it's just that whole holistic understanding of employees that we've never really touched on before, right? Really understanding people's own personal situations, whether they're working in an office or whether they're working in a home office, as it were, or working at the dining room table, if they're going to be homeschooling, as well as the fact that they're going to try and carry on their day job. Such huge implications, and I think, as you say, just checking in and managing stress has been just a huge part, an additional HR role for many executives. Thank you so much, Rob. And Rob, we've had a question come in specifically for you, which I'll pose to you a little bit later on, but keeping on rolling. John, how about yourself? What's been the main learnings for you over the past year?
Well, I think the key word is empathy. Really trying to take that time to understand the needs of other people, and then, as you rightly pointed out earlier, where people are in their lives, their personal circumstances. The challenge that we have within the world of cybersecurity is our adversaries don't care about what color our tick boxes are, the PowerPoints, all that sort of good stuff. I mean, they basically play what's in front of them. So they're online 24/7, and that can have an immense amount of pressure on the team. So taking the time to understand where people are coming from and helping them navigate that personal journey. Having the empathy for not just the own team members, but also stakeholders. There's always a high degree of anxiety, especially as their business is moving more online and a distributed operating model, and just working through that. And I think that was a key learning, is really just making sure that everyone's in a good place mentally to be able to support that journey.
Absolutely love that. Ashwin, how about yourself? Key learning for the past year?
Couple of things. One is expect the unexpected, frankly. So in my past life, I did a lot of disaster recovery work when I was working in New Zealand. And, typically you'd actually cover things like, you've lost your data center and you've got to cater for that. Nobody ever thought that there's going to be a major global pandemic and everybody would actually have to work from home, right? So expect the unexpected and make sure you're actually covering the outlying situations as well. So that's one of the first things. And a lot of people, when I speak to my colleagues in the industry, sort of air that themselves as well. And the other thing is just support the business. You've got to support the business. Cyber, unfortunately, more often than not, is labeled as the people that actually say stop. No, we've got to make sure that we're actually supporting the business. And the analogy I use is brakes in a race car. It actually doesn't slow you down. It makes you go faster around the corners.
I absolutely love that analogy. It's such a great way of thinking about it, because of course we don't want to be seen as the department of no for certain. So Michael has written in and asks, is it up to, so this is for you, Rob, is it up to faculty to pass on your cyber awareness strategy to students? How do you reach such a huge user base?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Michael. Look, it is a huge challenge. And as a university, we have limited resources. I do have dedicated resources that focus on the cyber awareness across the university. But to reach all those nooks and crannies of the faculties, we've established an information security champions network. And we meet with them quarterly, pass them on information, and work with them on what we can provide out through their faculty to not only their faculty staff but to the students.
There we go. Michael, thank you for your question. So, I mean, in the same light, an additional question then is, how are you creating and then maintaining an organization-wide culture of data security? As we know, when you're in the office, you have physical reminders, you have those paper shredders to shred appropriately paper documents, you have, perhaps you feel more relaxed to be able to say, hey, have you received this email? Do you know where this link's coming from before clicking on it? We've been remote working. A lot of us are now hybrid, where you're in the office, out the office. So how have you translated that organization-wide culture of data security in these new times? Ashwin, I'll come to you first for that one.
Sure thing. So I'm going to actually start off with the bad, and then I'll talk about the good. So the bad that I've actually seen, which doesn't work, and I'll put my hand up and say we're using that internally, is just trying to bash people with computer-based learning modules. And I'm one of the worst ones. I just tick through all the slides and then answer all the questions at the end and go, waha, I've got my certificate. Doesn't work, right? We turned it on its head. And then we basically looked at everyone, what everyone was doing and making it very relevant to them. For instance, if we're actually talking to the executives, we will actually talk about things like, sitting in the lounge at the airport and making sure that your screen isn't open, you aren't actually reading the as unreleased annual report, things like that. So customize it to your audience. And regular reinforcement as well with respect to what's actually going on. So with COVID happening, there were regular messages sent out using various channels to our user base. And we created a cheat sheet as an example as well, around working safely from home, securing your wireless, all these things to make sure that people actually got the message and it was easy to consume.
Now that must have been quite a challenge there, Ashwin, to tailor so many messages. So how did you practically go about that, ensuring that you were pitching it to the right audience?
So it's kind of similar to what actually Rob said earlier, right? So you've just got to understand what is it that the people actually do and make sure you're actually speaking their language. So, if you're talking to a technical audience, you've got to make sure that you're actually making sure that your message is aligned that way. If you're talking to, say, frontline staff, reception staff, you talk about things like physical security and tailgating and, picking up the guy or the girl who's actually who's looking dodgy. It's about those things. And again, you won't be focusing on those messages so much when you're talking to finance. So it's really about understanding what each area is doing and just subtly tailoring those messages to their job roles.
I love that. Fantastic. John, how about yourself? How have you been creating and then maintaining that organization-wide culture of data security?
Well, for me, it's about having the right people around you. And so I'm blessed to have a fantastic team led by a lady by the name of Jasmine Craft. And so she's done an amazing job of building a security culture here at Bupa. What we've done is we've done a number of things. First one is the security coaches program. So we've got about 120 people in the organization who actually are folks within the business who double up as security coaches so that they're able to give us that feedback around the right type of conversations for the different parts of the organization, whether it be in retirement villages, whether it be in the frontline retail, whether it be in finance, and so forth. And that really allows us to be able to get relevant conversations happening with a number of our colleagues in the business. The second thing is this belief that people are our first line of defense. And I borrow a concept from when I was in Singapore up there for 14 years. The Singapore government talk about a total defense strategy, and it starts with the individual. And so what we sort of look at there is, okay, if you can live your life with a degree of security, and we look at cybersecurity as a life skill. Technology is not going to go away. I don't think it's a passing fad. I think it's going to be here with us for a little while. So being able to really secure your own personal life and the life of your families and your loved ones is really important. And if what you do in your personal life, you'll also take that into your work life as well, especially with the reality of COVID. We're working from home as I am at the moment. So what I do personally at home absolutely impacts what happens in the corporate environment. So, there's a big focus on us being able to really make cybersecurity a life skill for the entire organization. And also, we focus on we don't want to fail big, but we do tolerate little failures, and that's that sort of experience. And I think I mentioned it earlier before we went on air, right? The difference between knowledge and wisdom. And wisdom comes from experience. So we need to create that environment where people do feel safe, that they can make a few little mistakes, right? Because we need to be able to use technology to drive the organization forward. And it does mean that we're going to make a few little mistakes here and there, but we need to make sure those mistakes are ones that we can recover from, and they're not going to ultimately cause serious harm to the organization. So it's an integrated plan. It's one that is all around people and scaling the capability and not being the office of no, as you said before, and really trying to find a secure way to be able to make the business thrive.
Absolutely, and it's such a huge challenge, right? Making people feel secure when they know they've probably, if it's as simple as clicking on a link that's taken you to a site, and now suddenly you've compromised the system. You're going to feel a certain type of way when you do that. So enabling a culture that says, actually, I'm going to put my hand up and say, look, I think I've done something wrong here, or just questioning it is such a delicate and sensitive thing. So it's really interesting to hear that you've been successful in maintaining that one, John. And then Rob, coming full circle back to you. Obviously, you mentioned there about the student faculty, but what about the wider organisation as a whole and that culture of data security?
Yeah, so I think for us, it's probably a similar story to what John talks about. So he calls security champions security coaches in their organisation. Our security champions have that same sort of role to bring back that information from areas in the university that we can use to tailor our programs. We've also taken very much a teach and test sort of view on the actual training, and we send out our training in quite small bites. So we got a couple of short videos, and then we'll do some sort of testing after that, often a phishing test, which I know everybody hates phishing tests, but what we found is that people are talking to us in the corridors about, oh yeah, I saw that thing you sent me the other day. It wasn't very good, was it? Or or it was good. So I think it's about getting people talking about things, and then it's about regularly communicating right through your organisation from either your board or your risk and audit committee down about those things. So everybody's getting sort of the same information but tailored to themselves. It is really important that people feel that we've got that degree of care for them. So that's really how we aim our training to teach people rather than punish people for doing the wrong thing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now we only have 5 minutes left together, and a question that has come in, I'm going to merge with the last question that I had planned as well, which is all around business value. As we know, whenever there's any implications of a financial crash or there's any kind of budget restrictions, and I think we're all going to be experiencing that either now or in the future, and budgets get questioned, displaying business value is more important now more than ever. So and the audience member here asks, how are you defining your business objectives? How are you kind of proving value to the business? So what are you doing to display that business value really, really clearly? Ashwin, I'll come to you first for that.
Sure thing. And for us, it's actually about making sure that cyber is not an IT thing that stands on its own. It's very much about risk management. And as soon as you actually put that hat on, straight away, the business objective, the business value conversation comes into play, right? Every business is going to undertake risks as they actually operate. Unfortunately, businesses aren't that au fait with cyber risk. They are obviously very clued up with financial risk, as an example. But it's actually about making sure that you're actually educating the business around what cyber risk is, why you need to manage it, and how you actually need to manage it. And as soon as you actually use that thread, you will start adding value to the business, and you would actually start satisfying that particular business objective. There was another question earlier on ISO as well, and I think it's actually tied, right? I mean, if you look at ISO, it's a great standard, but it goes part way towards risk management. If you are using ISO as an example, make sure you actually understand the threat landscape and pull that into the picture as well. Make sure you actually are understanding, what the impact of a breach would be to the business, and you're clearly communicating that to the powers that be in very plain English. So that, to me, is how we've actually addressed that point.
I love that. So it's about the position that you put yourself in and perspective. That's fantastic. Rob, how about yourself? Business value.
Yeah, look, I think we can all measure business value by some metrics and things like that. But I think the thing that really defines your business value is the quality of the conversations that you're having across your business. So it's really important, as Ashwin talked about, is having a solid risk framework that you can talk confidently about, and you can say to an end user or to a stakeholder that a risk needs to be managed in a particular way, and this is how you could do that. And then establish with them good process maturity around how they're going to measure how that risk will be managed over time. And as you build that whole risk management framework, I think you build that credibility. If you're allowing people to take calculated risks, then the business moves forward, and hopefully everybody's happy.
I love that. Hopefully everyone's happy. That's always good. And John, to round us off in the last couple of minutes here.
Yeah, so I'll tie together two threads there from Ashwin and also from Rob around the quality of the conversation and also risk management. So we've been embarking on using qualitative risk management as our approach. So quantitative, forgive me on that one, where ultimately dollars and cents, money is the language of business. People may not like that, but that is the simple reality. So if we can actually articulate clearly what is the value at risk for the organization in terms of financial sense, we can then start talking, having those quality conversations with the business colleagues around investments that need to be made in terms of reducing that value at risk. So for example, if we have a ransomware risk that we model out for a particular business unit, and we say, look, the value at risk based on a single loss expectancy is somewhere in the magnitude of, say, between $5 and $7 million. And our control environment at the moment means that we think that the single loss, so the frequency of that happening might be every couple of years. We can start to sort of see what is the real value at risk, and then we start saying, okay, look, we can strengthen our control environment by making these investments, which is, say, a magnitude of, say, $300,000, right? And we can see what that actually means in terms of reducing that value at risk. So you can start to say, look, we can reduce the value at risk by making this investment, and you're actually having a commercial conversation, but the underlying mechanics of all of that really feeds into a lot of things that our cybersecurity professionals love, which is threat modeling, understanding the assets that are at risk and things like that. So it brings it all together, and it's a really strong unifying way to have that risk management conversation with a high degree of quality that's actually going to make the business want to be engaged, because they do care about actually protecting their bottom line.
Absolutely, they do. They certainly do care about protecting the bottom line. Well, thank you to all three of you for joining me today. It's been an absolutely fantastic discussion, and thank you obviously to the audience members for sending in those questions as well. Now, as I say, we are now out of time. So just a reminder that this has been a top 100 panel. Now, if you'd like to see who else featured within the list and read the interesting interviews within the report, please do click the link within the description and you'll be able to see everyone who is in the top 100. Now, we will be running these panels every Wednesday. So next week we'll be joined by our NEA top 100 members. But until then, it is goodbye. Thanks so much for joining us.